Welcome to our 200th episode of the FlipSide. First up, some residents in the Cedar Lawn area are not happy about a plan to build a public housing project in their backyard. Ron, what are the plans, and do you think this group has a point?
I think the group had a point, but I think the group went about it in the wrong way. If I were the group, I would go in and listen to what's going on, because there are very precise plans for this project. It's not just a housing project. It's going to be a housing development that Todd Snook is involved in, along with the Hagerstown Housing Authority, and in the process, they've determined how they are going to deal with this housing development, like they did the one in the West End, where the West End projects years ago was totally revitalized. Mm-hmm. And out along the road will be 16 private houses for sale.
Right.
They won't be rented. There'll be 16 houses that'll be for sale. But I think the group has overreacted and should stay there and listen and become part of a solution and not a problem. Well,
and as I'm sure you know, and I've run into this as well as running for various offices and what have you, there is a perception issue, and I think that there is a knee-jerk reaction that occurs within certain communities to whenever they hear public housing. The reality is we keep complaining about having, the various classifications of citizens that we have within the city. By the same token, we're not taking any responsibility for integrating these people. We complain about taxes being spent on things, but when it comes to personal responsibility, when it comes to welcoming people, when it comes to integrating people into a particular community, suddenly it becomes a knee-jerk reaction. I think sometimes there is an uglier side to that. So there is a whether it's racial, whether it's ethnic, whether it's whatever it is, but that sometimes crops its head. But there has to be realization. If you look at most urban revitalization projects that have occurred around the country, whether it's in DC and other large cities, it's always been, you can gentrify an area, meaning that you drive all the poor people out, or you can have a mixed income status where you have people at all income levels, including public housing, and you're integrating those people into the greater, and home ownership, and you're integrating all those various layers of society into the same fabric of a neighborhood, and then you're generating or creating more of a neighborhood feeling or more of an integrated feeling.
Yeah, I think a lot of these people who are probably going to move into this, new development, it'll be people somewhat similar to those who are complaining. Disabled, elderly. I mean, some of it's mentioned in what you read about the people who showed up at this. A lot of these people aren't all that much different, and I think a lot of it is simply it's change.
But honestly, even if they were different,
well, exactly.
The point of the matter is just because somebody is in a different economic bracket doesn't somehow automatically make them a criminal or more susceptible to committing crimes or anything else. And that is a perception problem.
Well, it is. And again, some of these people are disabled. My work with hospice, I've dealt with, disabled veterans and things who are poor. And they would be they're not about to go out committing crimes, every other afternoon. Or these people, I think, this was made public over 6 months ago. There was something before the city council and all, and now they're saying, well, they never heard anything. Well, it's out there.
Tyler,
it was in the Herald Mail.
Well, I think part of the outrage was because there was sort of a messaging problem where they didn't communicate it to as many people as quickly as possible. You said, and correctly, that this has been public for 6 months, but most people didn't actually know about it, even the people that are going to be affected because it's going to be near them, until May 16th. Now, the plans, there's going to be public spaces, there's going to be open spaces where the plan looks like a pretty good plan for a community, and I think that it would have been much more well received if the messaging had been a little bit clearer from the beginning and allowed everyone to understand what was going to happen and sort of plan for that.
Yeah, it often doesn't happen. I had a winery built across the street from my house, and I didn't get any of that kind of courtesy in the neighbors. They've gotten more than we got.
Well, and
so I think it's all a matter of perception here on both sides. And I suspect even the people who, the housing authority people, well, if you do this really early on, it might be a can of worms and create a number of other issues you don't necessarily need to have when you're starting out. Exactly.
Well, and Ron, I think you're absolutely right, Tom, in that it's always a double-edged sword, because what level of communication or what means of communication really reaches people out? Do you send something with a bill? Do you send them a letter personally? Do you post something in a paper? The vast majority of citizens, and I know from having run several campaigns trying to reach citizens in the city, vast majority of people don't pay attention. And it doesn't matter what messaging you have in place, they're not going to get it.
Well,
and they're going to complain that they were not let know.
Until it directly affects them, and it's completely.
But one of the problems
But even then, literally until it's shoved in their face, they won't pay attention.
Yes, I mean, this happened in Boonesboro with that whole trash issue they had. I mean, the people who were running all this sent personal letters to the citizens and people there who apparently didn't read them, even though, I think you have to have sympathy for both sides of this.
Well, the difficulty you have here, Cedar Lawn's not in the city of Hagerstown.
But this
The
other
city of
place
Hagerstown's boundary runs through Cedar Lawn, however. Just runs through it to make it contiguous to the land that they're going to develop. I would hope, because there's been a lot of negative comments about the housing authority, and I would hope there would be a point in time in the very near future that FlipSide bring officials from the Hagerstown Housing Authority on for a couple blocks on the flip side and let them talk about some of the things they do. Let them talk about places that they're not responsible for, Elizabeth Court, the Alexander House, and a lot of those places that they're not responsible for, that they get blamed for, or Washington Gardens.
To be perfectly honest, and knowing quite a bit about the Housing Authority, I think they do a very good job.
Amen.
Well, I think that's going to be the last thought on that. So, next up on the flip side, social media. Do the dangers outweigh the benefits? Our panel has plenty of opinions. We're back in 3 minutes.